We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 1st of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead, we'll look at the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation summit taking place in China. Is this the makings of a new world order or just another talking shop? Then,
when people talked of power, so much of it has come out of this period of US dominance. And that made soft power look more effective than it is now.
Author Philip O'Brien will discuss the evolution of warfare and its impact on the conflict in Ukraine. We'll have a browse through the day's papers and ask if museums are becoming too expensive to run. We'll cross to Jakarta to check on the status of the unrest in Indonesia, and we'll go to Cape Town as spring comes to South Africa. Plus,
hi, I'm Fiona Wilson, Monocle's Tokyo Bureau Chief. I'll be bringing you the latest news from Asia Pacific.
More from Fiona a little later in the show. And finally, we'll take you to Venice to join in the buzz around the 82nd Film Festival there. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. A 6.0 earthquake in Afghanistan's Kunar province has left hundreds feared dead or injured, with rescuers struggling to reach remote villages. Europe is drawing up plans for a multinational troop deployment to Ukraine, backed by US support. And Houthi rebels stormed UN offices in Yemen's capital Sana'a, detaining at least 11 staff and seizing property. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, China is hosting leaders from across Asia, Europe and Africa for the annual Shanghai Co-operation Organisation summit in Tianjin. Sometimes branded the NATO of the East, the SCO now has 10 member states, including China, Russia, India, Pakistan and Iran, together representing around a quarter of global GDP and more than 40% of the world's population. This is billed as the bloc's most consequential summit to date, with Washington ratcheting up the tariffs on China and India and tensions between India and Pakistan still raw after the recent war. The event has been watched as a test of whether the SCO is becoming a genuine counterweight to Western alliances. Well, I'm joined now by Bill Hayton, who's Associate Fellow at Chatham House's Asia Pacific programme. Bill, it's very good to have you back on the show. Do you think the SCO is a serious organisation with real clout for leaders outside the Western sphere?
Yes, I think increasingly so. I mean, when it started back in 1991, it was Russia, China, and 4 of the 5 Central Asian countries, and it looked a bit odd, really. They just sort of put out the odd statement. But what they did then was a lot of confidence building. But really, it's taken in the last sort of quarter century. It's really taken off, and particularly now, with the arrival of India into the club. And for a time, people thought, well, India and China have these disputes, it's going to split the club. But thanks to Donald Trump, India is now sufficiently unhappy with the Americans that it's prepared to go along and be a lot more consequential, I think, in the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation.
Right, because, of course, this is Narendra Modi's first visit to China in 7 years. Now, he and Xi held a bilateral meeting yesterday. What came out of it and what are the consequences? You mentioned Trump. If China and India draw closer, what does that mean for America?
Well, it is fascinating. I mean, Donald Trump's timing on this is, couldn't really have been worse for the United States or better for China, because India and China have had this border dispute, which has been going on since 1962, got a lot worse, and 5 years ago, and that really had, slowed down the growth of relations between the two. But the imposition of the massive tariffs on India by Donald Trump has meant, I think, that the Indians have suddenly thought, oh, he's not our friend. Let's look to other options. I mean, India is famously sort of non-aligned in its foreign policy, but it has historically very good relations with Russia. It's been much more wary of China. But for the first time, we're seeing the leaders of those three countries really kind of apparently getting on like a house on fire at this summit in Tianjin. And hence this sort of statement from the Chinese leader, the dragon, meaning China, and the elephant, can cooperate together. And I think this is, exactly what the Chinese always hoped the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation would do.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder how significant it is that the leaders of India and Pakistan are sitting down together so soon after fighting a war.
Well, again, and I think this is, what the Chinese government or the Communist Party would think would be the merits of the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation is that these countries with major disputes sit down and be in the same room and sort of suppress their disputes with one another. I mean, they had the Chinese, the Russians, the Central Asians, had border disputes which have taken a very long time to resolve. They were, concerned about what the Chinese like to call the three evils of terrorism, separatism, and religious extremism. And so it's a very much a kind of, the state is in charge. The state will control things. It's very much a state-to-state way of resolving border disputes and things like that, rather than necessarily getting to the underlying issues, but kind of agreeing on stability and not changing borders and that kind of thing. That's the approach of the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation.
And what did Xi Jinping say in his opening remarks, particularly around what Beijing calls its new vision for global governance?
Well, China's vision for global governance is very much, a state-centered vision. It's about, individual countries dealing with individual countries. The Chinese don't like alliances. They don't like blocs. They don't like the EU as a whole. They much rather deal with individual countries. They don't like talk of, human rights and intervention in other countries' internal affairs. So this really is the common thread which links a lot of Chinese initiatives, from the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation to things like the Global Development Initiative and its Global Security Initiative, and all sort of under the umbrella of what the Chinese leadership calls the community of shared future for mankind. So it's really, at this level, it's very much an alternative to the sort of Western view of sort of promoting rights and democracy and all the rest of it. It's the opposite, if you like. It's a sort of, the state is in charge and the people should do what the state says.
And is it positioning itself as an economic bloc that could shield members from Western trade pressure, by which I mean mostly Donald Trump's tariffs?
Not really. I mean, for the Chinese, the economic stuff has been done in BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa grouping, and there are the sort of Belt and Road type initiatives. But of course, when you get leaders of these countries sitting together, I'm sure they will sort of agree, that they're, to work in many different areas. But the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation isn't an organisation that has a mandate to do economic things. They're not going to be, for example, negotiating, tariff reductions among themselves, at this meeting. It's going to be much more, I think, about, conventional, hard and to some degree soft security.
Well, speaking of security, which is a founding principle of the SCO, can it deliver on that front? Is it really the NATO of the East, or is it still too fractured to act collectively? How willing would members be to act in mutual defence?
I think there's very little interest in having an alliance in which commits countries to acting for other people. I mean, the Chinese in particular are allergic to that kind of idea in international relations. For them, it's about state sovereignty and each country choosing to cooperate with another country, according to their relative interests. So the idea, that China could be dragged into somebody else's conflict because of an alliance, I think is anathema to the leadership in Beijing. But consensus building, support, tactical, alliances, that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure, that's on the table.
And Turkey's President Erdogan is there. Is Ankara inching towards membership? And what would that mean for NATO if Turkey, which is obviously a member of NATO too, deepens the ties with the SCO?
Well, I think that would have to be an either-or choice for Turkey. I mean, you this couldn't be in NATO and the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation. I mean, it's one thing to say, you're a country that has a border with Iran, which is a member, and with Russia, which is and the Central Asian area, and therefore you have to have relations with the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation. But to actually join would be complete anathema for NATO. So I can't see Turkey joining, but I can see it, sort of talking up its big role as a link, as a hinge. But interestingly, if you're interested in the regional politics, the fact that the leaders of Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, who had long had very difficult relations, are meeting together in Tianjin, and talking about future cooperation, that I think shows you the power now of this grouping to kind of pull people together and start to think about a future direction rather than getting stuck in the old conflicts.
And just quickly before we go, Putin is there. Does Russia rely on the SCO to ease its isolation? What can Putin offer to other members? And ditto Iran, who obviously wants to get member support against European sanctions for its nuclear program. I mean, both of these are pariah states. How are they? How is their presence going to affect what happens?
Well, the fact that, Russia can be fairly confident now with China and most of the Central Asian countries that those borders are solid and secure, and it doesn't need to have huge numbers of troops or, kind of be alarmed about security threats along those borders, means it can concentrate much more effectively on the conflict in Ukraine. So, the fact that the SCO has stabilized the eastern end of Russia, if you like, and the relations with Central Asia has allowed Russia to get on and do other things. And of course, for the other countries attending, what they get out of, Russia is, that they see Russia and China as alternative poles in the world order, that they're not just beholden to the West and to the United States. So it allows them to make choices. And, for India, of course, that they've been getting cheap oil off the Russians, which is why Donald Trump is so upset with them. So, yeah, I mean, the idea, I think that, we really are, seeing, a genuine alternative, I think, for a lot of countries and in Asia and Africa and potentially even in Latin America. People will see this maybe as attractive to have options. So I think that the norm-setting power of the Shanghai Co-operation Organisation is strong and is getting stronger.
Bill, thank you very much indeed. That's Bill Hayton, Associate Fellow at Chatham House's Asia Pacific Programme. And this is The Globalist. Now, when it comes to predicting the outcomes of conflicts, even the experts struggle to give a full picture, and often they get it wrong. In a new book, War and Power, Who Wins Wars and Why, Philip O'Brien, Professor of Strategic Studies at St Andrews University, interrogates why this might be. Rather than focusing on the weapons in a nation's arsenal, O'Brien argues that analysts need to expand their lens to include economies, technological prowess and the strength of societies for indication on who will emerge on top from the current geopolitical crises engulfing the world. Well, earlier, Monocle's Julia Jen spoke to Professor O'Brien to find out more. She started by asking him what the definition of power really is.
When people talked of power, so much of it has come out of this period of U.S. dominance, this post-1945 period where the United States in many ways set the rules, kept a certain amount of stability. Yes, there was wars, but there was also a good deal of stability, globalization, international organizations, rules-based order, all working. And that made soft power look, I would argue, more effective than it is now. That the Europeans could say, oh, we have power because of our market. Well, actually, that power is not nearly as powerful as they thought when they're faced with the U.S. saying you have no military weapons, we're your backer, therefore you have to take inferior tariff positions. So ultimately, I think the thing about power is it needs to be based on something more than soft power. on the other hand, what you don't want to say is your power isn't just a list of your military equipment, which too many people fell back upon when looking at, say, Russia before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Oh, they have a big military, therefore they are powerful. Well, no, that doesn't do enough either, because a military in and of itself needs to be seen as a product, not as some manifestation in and of itself. So what I was trying to do is say what actually makes a state powerful and how does that power interact in war? And so I was trying to provide really sort of a framework for understanding power. What do you need? And then how is that shaped? So what do you need? You obviously need to be a technological, economic power. That's fundamental. If you don't have the economic, technological strength, you'll never be real power in the world. But that's not enough, because that can be shaped by your leadership, your society, your structure of government, so that in some cases you can be economically powerful and not be like the European Union, you might say militarily, structurally powerful. Or in other cases, you can have something like the United States in the 1980s, which did have effective political leadership. So that you have the economics and technology, but you need the rest to bring it through. And the only way to understand military power is looking at it as a product of these other factors.
And if we go to Europe, you write quite extensively about the decline of Europe in your book. How do you actually see the continent recovering? And also, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about, you talk about Russia, the Russian military before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, having a new look, so money being poured in and creating these kind of flashy new tanks, but then the tank's not actually working, that sort of thing. Do you think that's a danger that's happening on the continent now?
The Russians, it was totally the acceptance of PR in many cases over reality. And so the Russians said they were doing all this effective spending. They had all this new military equipment. Western reporters, Western analysts just accepted this as face value with no evidence whatsoever. They accepted it at face value. They downplayed systemic issues like corruption, leadership issues like a dictatorship, and said, oh, well, they have a lot of tanks, therefore they're going to be strong. It was just a fundamental misunderstanding of how power works. Now, Europe in some ways has gone the other way. That what Europe thought is, oh, we're powerful because we have economics and technology, therefore we don't really need a military. The United States will provide us the military. Well, that is now shown to be absolutely flawed. So the Europeans are punching way below their weight in international relations. And when it comes to Ukraine, it's very worrying, because Ukraine is of a huge importance to the future of Europe. And European states are not playing the role, I would argue, in their own future that they should be, and they've had to defer a lot to the USA. Europe is on a cusp, and I don't know which way Europe is going to go. I'd like an optimistic view saying Europe will get its act together. It will come up with a better structure. It will spend its money wisely. It will create its own military power. It will look after itself, which could be positive, very positive socially, instead of relying on the United States, calling the U.S. daddy, which is really humiliating. Europeans could stand on their own 2 feet. That, however, is not definitely going to be the case. There seems to be a lot of still foot dragging in Europe, an inability to understand the seriousness of the situation, a desperate desire to hope the United States and sort of comes to its senses and restarts this role as the strategic leader of Europe. So it could go either way. I mean, I think the issues are clear. Will Europe in some ways start thinking about defending itself from a European point of view without having to rely on the United States? If they will not give up being reliant on the United States, then they will never be a real power.
And do you have actually, if you don't mind answering this question, if you were sort of sitting there in governance of like France or the UK or Germany, whatever, and you actually had the ability to make these big decisions, like, would you actually recommend that, I don't know, the Europeans all commit, okay, we will send peacekeeping forces to Ukraine, or we will do this, or we will do that? Is there anything particular that you think they have to sort of make this move now? The
future of Ukraine is vital to the future of Europe as we know it. If we actually believe in the future of a democratic Europe, sort of a Europe of cooperation among the states, a Europe where the borders are sacrosanct, which I think sometimes people have forgotten. There hasn't been a conquest of border, changing of borders since the end of the Second World War. If we actually believe these things, which everyone said they believe these things, it's incredibly important that Ukraine comes out of this war victorious and intact. Otherwise, the Europe that we know is over. It's absolutely over. The Europe of post-1945 cooperation on the whole and trying to respect each other's boundaries and all of that, that's gone. So I believe that the Europe that came out of 1945 is important enough to try and defend, and part of that defense has to be in Ukraine. So I've been trying to say for 2 years that Europeans have to look at sending some kind of troops, be it air defense, training forces, into Ukraine. And certainly, if there is going to be a peace deal, which is very much open for debate right now, Europeans have to be willing to send forces into Ukraine. But this is a huge issue in terms of the USA, that Europeans are, they sound like they might do this, but then they go, of course, the US is going to have to underwrite it and underpin it. And U.S. commitment to the defense of Ukraine is not to be taken seriously, in which case will these European states not take it seriously? So that's what I mean. Everything is still very much in the balance.
Philip O'Brien, Professor of Strategic Studies at St Andrews University there, speaking to Monocle's Julia Jen. Now, still to come on the programme.
Winning is the best feeling there is. There's no other high like it in the world.
Well, that's from the movie The Smashing Machine, which has been screened at the Venice Film Festival. We'll catch up with the critic Karen Krasanovic, who's on the red carpet for us. This is The Globalist.
Craft is its own reward, which is why at UBS we're honoured to work alongside over 50 of today's leading Nobel laureates, each an expert in the art of economic science, bringing you engaging discussions, actionable insights, and inspired solutions, all focused around the questions that shape our world today. For a better outlook, find a Nobel perspective. UBS. Banking is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. The time here in London is 7:21. I'm Georgina Godwin, and joining me in the studio is Yossi Meckelberg, who's Senior Consulting Fellow at the MENA programme at Chatham House. Good morning to you, Yossi.
Good morning.
We're going to start off with this. I'm laughing because the prospectus in the Washington Times is extraordinary, the Washington Post. Yeah. Tell us about this story, which plans the relocation of the entire population of Palestine and basically creating Trump's Riviera.
Building sort of AI city. But the minute that I saw the title of the prospectus, The Great Trust, you know where it's all going. It's making Gaza great again, everything great again. And the title is from Demolished Iranian Proxy to a Prosperous Abrahamic Ally. It's all about moving the population of Gaza outside Gaza, building some sort of a AI modern city. And the trick thing is they said those who own land there, they will get some digital currency and they will be able to buy it back. What they forget to say, and for the more innocent public that reads it, most of people in Gaza are refugees. They don't own anything there. Even the people that's original from Gaza, whether they can prove that they own land or not will be very difficult. So the idea is to remove the Gazan people there, push them away. They call it voluntary, but nothing as we see right now is voluntary in Gaza. And then building a city, building a Riviera, which will make a lot of people rich probably in the United States. The people behind it are the same people that came with the idea of the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, of supplying the humanitarian aid instead of the UN agency, and we know how successful this has been, that more than 1,000 people have been killed so far queuing for food. And now they're working 38 pages is like, property developers forgetting that right now there is a war that already cost the life of more than 60,000 people in Gaza.
And at least 189 journalists. That's according to the front page of The Guardian today.
Yeah, and on the website you see the whole list of journalists, and Gaza becomes the deadliest place for journalists in modern times. And you just saw 2 weeks ago that actually even Israel admitted that it targeted a specific Al Jazeera, Anas al-Sharif, a journalist. Now, they claim he was a Hamas operative. It can question whether at the time that they killed him, he was. But the fact that 5 other journalists that were with him were killed as well. So even if they claim that he was Hamas, the idea that you target a place with 5 other people and kill them as collateral damage, that's beyond questioning killing Anas el-Sharif. We remember also, you have Abu Akleh that was killed in the West Bank a few years ago. So it's become a place that either journalists are just targeted by Israel, because we also know that they don't allow journalists to enter into Gaza, so they don't want what happened, or they just don't care if as anyone else in Gaza that is killed right now. And this is something, it's good that The Guardian put it on the front page, that how dangerous Gaza became for journalists just to do their job and report to all of us what's going on there.
Yeah, and just to note here that Monocle supports the Committee to Protect Journalists, and of course always looking for that very worthy organisation, always looking for donations. Let's talk about Cuba. Now, you've got a special interest in Cuba, don't you?
Yeah, because in my younger years I researched revolutions, and I compared U.S. foreign policy towards Cuba and Iran. For obvious reason, I couldn't go to Iran to do my research, or at least not come back. So I spent more time in Cuba many times as they're going out of what was known as the special times that were very difficult at the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union collapsed, didn't support Cuba anymore. The American sanction still there. And gradually they came out of it. President Obama visited for the first time Cuba. Many of the sanctions been removed, and it got out of the difficult times. Still, the end of the Castro era, and one of the main source of income is tourism. Though exporting medical stuff is personnel brings more hard currency to Cuba than tourism, but you could see building hotels everywhere. Now, as a result of COVID, there is occupancy of around 30%. So the island really suffers a lot. So the drive to develop there slowed down. Poverty is still increases all the time, and Trump reintroduced most of the sanctions. So it's very difficult for Cubans to travel. Any trade with the United States is almost stopped. Actually, companies are punished if they trade with Cuba. Cuba became not only not a foreign policy in American politics, but domestic politics, an obsession. Because to win elections, you need Florida. In Florida, you have a lot of the exiles that hate the regime, the communist regime in Cuba. So they have a lot of power. Bear in mind, the Secretary of State is a descendant of Cubans, Mark Rubio. His grandparents came from Cuba. And as a result, we can envisage that this will get probably worse and worse.
Yeah. Bit of Cuban trivia for you here. Did you know that the UK musician, well, we think he's from UK, but in fact his mother was Colombian, Phil Manzanero, who was in Roxy Music, was a small child in Cuba during the revolution?
I didn't know that.
There's a lot about it in his autobiography. It's fabulous.
If you go to Cuba, you want to enjoy almost every night jazz. Cuba is a place, and ballet.
Yes.
Their ballet
Absolutely.
there is fantastic.
Yeah, and cigars and cocktails.
Above all of this.
But not so much classical music. But we are hearing now from the FT that Beethoven is good for your brain.
Apparently so. So what we realized that actually there is impact of classical music on your brain. And scientists said that actually if you look at a musician brain, you can identify it immediately, unlike a mathematician, probably journalist. And so this is something that works specifically on the brain. There is now in Switzerland a concert in which at the time of the music played, also the show of the conductor's brain movement at the time, and visualizing for the audience what happens in the brain, why music is played and how it affects it. Now, it's been a nice experiment. It's interesting to go and watch, but most importantly, they also understand that there is something that can help with therapy whether it's dementia, Alzheimer, other conditions, by understanding how music can help to change certain areas of the brain. So it's a really interesting article about it all started by someone that was hit by lightning. And as a result of it, someone that has no interest in music, knew very classical music, and after this happened and he recovered, took him a few months to recover, all of a sudden a new talent appeared of being able not only to enjoy classical music, but actually compose it as well.
Extraordinary. And that's something to do with the electromagnetic force rewiring
of the brain.
The brain. Extraordinary. Yossi Meckelberg, I wish you odes of joy. Yossi is a senior consulting fellow at the MENA programme at Chatham House. And this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. A strong 6.0 magnitude earthquake struck Afghanistan's Kunar province, leaving hundreds feared dead or injured as homes collapsed in remote hamlets. Officials warn the toll will climb as rescuers reach mountain villages along the Pakistani border. Europe is preparing detailed plans for a multinational troop deployment to Ukraine as part of post-war security guarantees, with US backing for command and intelligence. Leaders will meet in Paris this week to refine the agreement made with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky last month. And Yemen's Houthi rebels raided UN offices in Sana'a on Sunday, detaining at least 11 staff and seizing property in a dramatic escalation after an Israeli strike killed the Houthis' prime minister. The UN says the latest detentions add to more than 20 staff already held, some since 2021. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now for a look behind the headlines, here's Monocle's Tom Webb on whether museums around the world are getting too expensive to run.
Following the news that Paris's Louvre has fallen into dilapidation, another famous institution has put out a desperate plea for help. Directors at Amsterdam's Van Gogh Museum warned of its closure this week if the Dutch state doesn't cough up €2.5 million for renovations, claiming the €8.5 million annual government cheque is no longer enough. After a 1962 deal with the Van Gogh family, who passed on its vast collection of artworks and letters by the artist to the museum, the Dutch state pledged to back its maintenance. But the management team cautioned that the museum's ageing facilities put both the public and paintings at risk. Despite welcoming almost 2 million visitors last year and housing Van Gogh's sunflowers, the museum is struggling, something higher ticket prices won't be able to fix, according to research by US foundations Remuseums. The Dutch Culture Ministry should lend an ear to the museum's director before costs spiral further.
That was Monocle's Tom Webb. And for more, you can sign up to our daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute. Head over to monocle.com/minute. This is The Globalist. It is 13:32 in Jakarta and 8:32 in Zurich. Indonesian students and civil society groups called off protests in Jakarta today after a week of escalating anger over lawmakers' pay and the police response following deadly riots across the country at the weekend. The unrest spread from Jakarta across Indonesia, resulting in 7 deaths and hundreds of injuries. Multiple regional parliament buildings were set on fire and homes of government officials and lawmakers were targeted by looters. President Prabowo cancelled his planned trip to China and announced concessions yesterday, including cuts to parliamentary allowances. Well, I'm joined now by Randy Mulyanto, who's a journalist based in Indonesia. Randy, I wonder if you could tell us what triggered these protests and how they developed.
Hi, Georgina. Thank you for having me. Well, so these protesters actually demanded, the parliament to cancel its MPs' housing allowance, which is up to 10 times the minimum wage. in Jakarta. And I'm just going to give you some context, basically, that Jakarta is the country's wealthiest city. So you can imagine, I mean, the disparity, the gap, if you compare this amount to other provinces and other cities. I mean, obviously, it's way bigger for residents in those provinces and cities. So there's the inequality and unfairness element here, Georgina. And also, I think insult to injury. I mean, these MPs also basically said, I would say, tone-deaf remarks, that angered these protesters and members of the public as a whole. One of those MPs said those who wanted to dissolve the parliament were the dumbest people, while another MP defended the housing allowance. So that's one side of the story. But in addition to, those demands, I mean, there were also labor unions calling for increases in minimum wages, tax reforms, as well as, the enactment of the asset confiscation bill. So basically, again, back to the one of the main demands, Georgina, these MPs were seen as getting generous pay, packages and benefits, but their performance and their impact, I would say, were not as much as fair to these kinds of pay packages.
So what's the current situation in Jakarta now? They've called off the protests?
Yeah, I mean, the situation is fluid, obviously, like any demonstrations. But for now, I heard that the situation, in front of the National Parliament is now relatively calmer compared to the previous days. And also schools in Jakarta, also require students to learn from home, as well as some offices have basically required their staff to work from home as well. So, I mean, the situation is relatively calmer in Jakarta, but it remains to be seen.
So what concessions did Prabowo announce that led to the cessation or the temporary cessation?
That's right. So he basically, mentioned that these allowances would be revoked, although he did not say, I mean, by the percentage, whether it was going to be scrapped in its entirety or not. But that's, I guess, that really quelled the public anger to a certain extent. I mean, the president did say something after all. And then, basically the president also mentioned that, overseas work trips for these MPs will be suspended. Although it remains to be seen. I mean, but I think the key here is the fact that the president and the government need to stay true to its words.
And finally, can you tell me what impact you think this is going to have on the president's political standing, Indonesian politics, and the economy and foreign investor confidence?
That's right. So I think the public will definitely pay more attention to the president's and the MP's remarks. After all, this is the top story nationwide. Obviously, people are wondering whether he will stay true to his words, and obviously whether the MPs will basically be more careful, be more considerate, I would say, in the face of the economic hardship. So that's one side of the story. And obviously, the MPs will definitely be more sensitive, hopefully, to the people's demands and current realities on the ground. But I think economy-wise, I mean, the Jakarta Composite Index started weaker. I mean, it weakened today on Monday. Obviously, that's one thing to pay attention to. But so far, the economy is relatively okay. I mean, it's not chaotic, Georgina. And also foreign embassies have also issued advisories, such as the US Embassy. They issued advisories and alerts with regards to these protests.
Randy, thank you very much indeed. That's Randy Mulyanto in Jakarta. You're with Monocle Radio. It is 8:38 in Cape Town, 7:38 in London, and I'm joined now by Nicola Jo Bergstedt, who's a journalist based in Cape Town, for a roundup of news from the tip of Africa. Nicola Jo, thanks for joining us. Now, Cape Town made international headlines this week after the Hawks raided the home of the satirist Anton Taylor. Just tell us more about this story. What happened and what does it tell us about free expression in South Africa?
Good morning, Georgina. So Anton Taylor is a Cape Town-based comedian and TikTok creator. He's known for his satirical takes on politics, on rugby culture, and on South African stereotypes. Recently, he posted a video poking fun at a suspended police minister, Senzo Mchunu. Now, Mchunu was suspended back in July after allegations he colluded with criminal syndicates and interfered in politically sensitive investigations. That prompted our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, to launch a judicial inquiry, which is currently in process. It was supposed to start today, but there have been a few procurement delays. Now, back to the video where Anton jokes about a bribe involving a BMW and 3 prostitutes. It was very classic Taylor. It was tongue-in-cheek, it was edgy, and it was a way of really holding power to account through humor, which is what South Africans really do quite a lot. But the reaction was out of the ordinary. The Hawks, which is South Africa's elite crime-fighting unit, usually tasked with tackling organized crime, actually raided his home. They took away his electronic devices, they seized his phone, and they opened a criminal case, which is very out of the ordinary in South Africa. And that is after Mchunu himself laid a complaint. To many, it felt like a sledgehammer response to a skit. People are asking, is satire now being treated almost like a crime against the state? It's really out of the ordinary. And that's why the story really matters far beyond Cape Town. Freedom of expression is one of the cornerstones of our democracy, hard won in our constitutional settlement back in the 90s. But when comedians are raided by the same unit that deals with gang bosses and state capture, it really raises alarm bells. It's a reminder that democracy isn't only tested in the courts or in the commissions, it's really tested beyond and in culture and online and on social media. So we'll have to see how this one plays out.
Now, Cape Town is expecting an influx of tourists because today's the first day of spring in South Africa. So tell us what the outlook is as the city heads into peak season.
Spring in Cape Town is honestly just such a special time. The wildflowers bloom along our coast, the days really get longer, the sun sets later, and the city begins gearing up for the busiest tourism months. September and October are just brilliant. And for visitors, particularly from the UK, the pound goes a very, very long way. But what feels very striking this year is this contrast. At a national level, South Africa's tourism sector has been rocked by leadership turmoil. The national board was dissolved earlier this year, the CEO was suspended, and there's a lot of political infighting. So in short, the machinery isn't really driving forward. But Cape Town, however, has stayed the course as it prepares for the season. In 2024 alone, visitors in the city generated more than 24 billion rand. That's more than £1 billion in spending, supporting over 106,000 jobs. Cape Town Tourism has partnered with more than 800 small and medium businesses and is bringing young people into the industry through its Future Tourism Leadership Program. As CEO Enver Dumini puts it, travelers care about the welcome, the safety, and the memories that they take home, not the governance disputes in Pretoria. And that's why Cape Town is positioning itself as one of Africa's most reliable destinations. It's resilient, it's exclusive, and it's globally competitive, even when the national picture kind of looks a bit uncertain. So I guess there's a reason why the city was voted the best city in the world in 2025 by the Time Out and the Telegraph's Travel Awards, right?
And finally, we understand that Cape Town's mayor will be speaking at our Quality of Life conference in Barcelona this week. So what message will he be bringing about the city, apart from it, of course, being a great tourist destination?
Yes, so our Mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis, will be joining the Quality of Life conference this week, and his focus is very much on Cape Town's inner city. The city has launched a mission to revitalize the central CBD, not just in terms of its aesthetic, but in tackling homelessness, in improving safety, and in encouraging sustainable mixed-use development. It's a very, very cool mission, and there's been a clear push to reclaim these neglected spaces, improve public lighting and cleanliness, and to strengthen partnerships with NGOs supporting vulnerable communities and the unhomed. The idea to make the city centre a place where people want to live and work and invest again, not just to visit. So for the global audience, Cape Town's story mirrors challenges faced by many cities after the COVID pandemic. You know, how to keep the urban centres vibrant, inclusive and safe. And the city's presence in Barcelona and the mayor attending the Quality of Life conference is timely. He'll be positioning Cape Town not just as a city of natural beauty, but as one that's actively working to improve livability and the quality of life for residents. So we wish him well on his travels to Barcelona, and we wish your team a brilliant Quality of Life conference, Georgina.
Nicola Jo Bergstead, thank you very much indeed. Nicola's a journalist based in Cape Town. And of course, the Quality of Life conference, as she says, takes place in Barcelona this weekend. Now, I understand we're pretty much at capacity, but if you jump on our website, you can possibly still get in to spend a little bit of time with the Monocle team. It will be the most wonderful party, I'm told, and a lot going on around the conference. So do have a look. That's happening in Barcelona this weekend. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
With UBS, you have a truly global partner, incorporating new technologies, innovative approaches, and unexpected opportunities, leading you to insights that help answer the questions that matter, delivered with passion, care, and unmatched expertise. Because it's about rising with the dawn each day, knowing that we can do even better. That's what banking is to us. Not just work, but a craft. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Now let's have some news from the Asia-Pacific region. And I'm joined from our studio in Tokyo by Fiona Wilson, our Tokyo Bureau Chief. Fiona, hello to you. I must just say what a delight it was to interview your husband, Richard Lloyd Parry, for Meet the Writers about his new book. It's getting fabulous reviews.
It's funny because we don't share the same surname. Some people don't know we've got anything to do with each other. But yes, you're right. Great reviews and a very good book. I have read it. And I also was just in Edinburgh hearing him speak at the Edinburgh Book Festival. So I am following closely. Thank you, Georgina.
Well, I just wondered because it's about a father and a young baby and quite a distant mother. Did you feel that was you?
I hope not. I do hope not. Yeah, I did have a few questions for Richard about this rather distant, cold mother. No. Whereas the man is really the sort of semi-hero, isn't it? Really, rather like Richard. Yeah, it's such an interesting book, and I think it puts together a lot of his experiences in Southeast Asia, particularly. I mean, he says that it's not really about any one country, but definitely it reminded me of some of the stories he told me about over the years.
Yeah, well, I absolutely loved it, and loved all the sort of literary themes it took. People can listen to that interview on Meet the Writers coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Let's talk about shooting bears.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny at all, is it? It's something that people don't know about Japan. Oh, well, they do if they live here, but there are a lot of bears in Japan. Japan is very forested, huge swathes of the country covered in forest. And there are a lot of bears and a lot of bear attacks. I mean, I was looking at the numbers, 219 last year. They were described as bear-related casualties. And the law has just changed today. There's been a revision to the Wildlife Protection and Management Law, which is basically giving local governments the right to, if they need to hire hunters to shoot bears that are causing trouble. It's not just bears, but it doesn't specifically say bears, but we know that's what it's talking about. And, from today, bears who are increasingly strolling into urban territory might want to be on the lookout.
Well, that's quite an extraordinary story. As you say, I had absolutely no idea that was even a problem. Is there an appetite for shooting them? Do people want to do it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, they are very, they're well loved here. And of course, this being Japan, obviously, you've got mascots, and in Hokkaido, there was tragically a hiker was killed earlier this month, and it was by a bear. And this maybe highlights part of the problem. It was a well-known bear. This bear even had a nickname. And the problem was that, people forget that, yes, you might see these bears, there are sightings of them, but they're wild animals. And when they're with their cubs, as this bear was, they can be extremely defensive, and they'll do what it takes to look after their cubs, even if the hiker didn't have any bad intentions. But no, there isn't a big appetite for hunting bears at all. There are hunters in Japan, licensed, because, people can't carry guns here in the normal course of events, but they do allow a certain amount of hunting. And in the north of Japan, Hokkaido, we're talking about these northern forests. You've got deer, boar, and people do want to eat those animals, not so much bear, I have to say.
Let's move on to the Japan Times, which is reporting that in spite of the increased threat from China and North Korea, Japan's self-defense forces can't find enough recruits. Why is that?
I know, this is a terrible story, isn't it? I mean, Japan has a self-defense force. It's not an army. You have to say that. Japan has a pacifist constitution. It's not allowed an aggressive force. That's been the way since the end of the war. So it doesn't have much of a status. It's called the SDF, the Jietai in Japanese, and they've got 250,000. They should have 250,000 people working for them, but there's a huge number. 10% of the posts are currently unfilled, and they've been trying hard to recruit. They've been trying to improve conditions, but I think it's a pretty low status job. It's considered a bit low status. It's very low profile. People really don't want to see armed Japanese or Japanese in military uniforms around town. So it's a pretty low profile job. And I think there was an interesting poll I saw where they asked people internationally, would you fight for your country? And I'm afraid Japan came out very low. Only 9% of people asked said they would fight for their country. So I think generally it's just not in people's mind. And originally people thought, OK, there was a lot of, disaster relief, and it was sort of doing good for the community. But increasingly with this threat from China, particularly China, I have to say, and this problem around the islands, far, far southwest of Japan, around Okinawa, and then you get to Taiwan. What will happen there, who knows? Suddenly, being in the SDF doesn't look like so much of a community job or looking after people in natural disasters. It looks like an actual kind of military job, and suddenly young Japanese don't fancy it quite so much.
And I'm sure it's not particularly well paid. And of course, that matters because everyone across the world is complaining about the rise of food prices, particularly rice. But there's one big chain of cheap restaurants in Japan that's actually reducing its prices. Why is that?
I mean, I thought I'd done a double take. When I saw this, I thought, what? This is somebody reducing prices. Every day in the paper at the moment, we are hearing about the increase in everything, supermarkets, pharmacies, rice particularly. This has been an ongoing discussion about the incredible increase in rice prices. And, for a long time when I was in Japan, inflation just didn't happen. Prices just stayed exactly the same for year after year after year. Suddenly, in the last few years, prices have gone up. It's really hurting people. Wages have not similarly risen, and people are feeling that pinch. So Skier, which is one of the big chains of it, they're called gyudon, beef bowls. It's slices of beef on rice. Classic dish to eat on your way home from your office job. You jump into these places. There's Yoshinoya, Matsuya, they're the other two, the big three, Skier's the third. And people just pop in and they have a quick bowl of rice and they head home. Now, what's happened is that because of the increase in rice prices, even they have become more expensive. And Skier said, right, we're going to drop the prices. So from Thursday, first time in 11 years, they're actually dropping the price of a gyudon, and it's completely contrary to the run of events in every other aspect of inflation. But they want to, they put out a statement saying they're trying to help people in difficult times. They know that people can't necessarily afford, and they want more people to be able to enjoy their delicious rice bowls.
I wonder how it makes economic sense, though, for them.
Well, honestly, probably doesn't right now, but the fact is they also increased their prices in March, and I think it went down very, very badly. They'd had a bit of a scandal earlier in the year about hygiene, and I think they suffered from that, and then they raised their prices. If anything, I think this is maybe a bit of an attempt at some good PR for the company and try and bring people back. But I don't think it makes a whole lot of economic sense. And it'll be interesting to see if rice prices continue to stay high, how long these reduced prices will go. Although they don't put a time frame on it, they've just said, that's how it's going to be. So maybe they're just doing a positive thing.
Fiona, thank you very much indeed. That's Fiona Wilson, Monocle's Tokyo Bureau Chief. Fiona's husband's book, that's Richard Lloyd Parry, is called In the Green Heart, and it's fabulous. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. The 82nd Annual Venice Film Festival enters its second week today. Critic Karen Krasanovic is there for us and joins us now from the City of Canals. Good morning to you, Karen. Describe the wonderful atmosphere, or perhaps it isn't wonderful at all, in Venice.
Well, don't forget, we are not in San Marco. We're not on the mainland, as it were, the main island. We're on the Lido, which is the long, skinny island sort of across the lagoon. And that's a little bit more like a suburb, and this is where they have the famous Venice Film Festival, and of course it's one of the major festivals of the year. But the atmosphere, unlike Cannes, is not blingy at all. It's elegant. It's very alluring. It doesn't have a lot of hubbub. I mean, you don't get jostled like you do at Cannes. It's just much more elegant and welcoming, and also the gelato is great.
But I understand it's quite muggy and there are a lot of mosquitoes too.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm so glad you can't see me because I've been bitten on my eye.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. So I'm wearing dark glasses all day today, except for the screenings. Yeah, there's a lot of them. They're quite insidious. But anyway, the smell of citronella is strong. And it's been very rainy and very muggy here. Not as bad as last year when it was so hot. You would actually just sweating in the queue because it doesn't matter. Well, unless you're a star, everyone with every pass, and there's a variety of different passes here to not only get tickets, which has been a problem this year, but also to get access, everybody has to queue. So there's a main area called the casino where a lot of the screening theaters are, and that's where we all congregate.
Mm-hmm. What have you seen? What's impressed you?
Oh gosh, well, I saw about 4 films yesterday. Generally, you try to see 6. And I managed to get, well, every festival, there's one film I have to see. And this year it was Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro, which is based on the book. I mean, quite strictly on the book, which I have to admit, I haven't read for a long time. And it is absolutely breathtaking. It's just beautiful. Whether you like Guillermo del Toro's fantastic style or not, there's very little of that. But Jacob Elordi, who's very tall, is playing the monster. And it's very moving. I found myself in tears, which you wouldn't expect at Frankenstein.
No, or of a movie critic, frankly.
No,
big girl pants, Karen.
Hard. But today, it's very exciting because I'm going to see Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt, or Wayne Johnson, in The Smashing Machine by Benny Safdie, which is one of the hot tickets this year. Very, very hot ticket. And then later on, we'll see Dead Man's Wire with Al Pacino by Gus Van Sant. This is out of competition. So I try to see as many competition films as possible, even if that means walking back to my flat last night with my eyes so dry watching things. I saw The Testament of I'm blanking now, Anne Lee with Amanda Seyfried, which was unusual. A lot of singing.
Huh. And have you seen the Putin film yet? Kremlin?
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you asked me about that. Yes, it's a very American take on sort of how Putin came to power, really. And it's got Paul Dano, Vikander, and also a surprise Jude Law. Now, this is a spoiler, so plug your ears. But the minute Jude Law comes on the scene as Putin, comes on the screen, there was a ripple of warm laughter through the theater, as I didn't recognize him, actually. He does a remarkable job. You know, we forget what a good actor he is.
He has a mask on?
No, I think they just changed his hair, and he changed his face, you know, like a proper actor.
Wow.
But it was really incredible and beautifully done, but a very, very American take. So it's a take on sort of Russia and politics for people that don't really follow politics.
Yeah. Finally, Karen, reports from the domestic box office say Jaws is number 2. Tell us why.
It's Jaws 50th, and they're you know, you can't turn without seeing an article about Jaws 50. Why is it so great? Why is it still a classic? Why can we still watch it? They put it out on IMAX. The 3D is out, and it's because not only the marketing, but also a lot of people haven't seen it. In fact, I saw it on IMAX with somebody who had not seen Jaws, and it's now second only to Weapons, which is, I believe, number 1 for the 4th week. It's extraordinary. And I'd have to say that if you're feeling cynical about the cinema, go and see Jaws.
Absolutely. And if it grows any more, we're going to need a bigger boat. Karen Krisanovich, thank you very much indeed. And that's all for today's programme. Thanks to our producers Laura Kramer, Tom Webb, Monica Lillis and Ryuma Takahashi. Our researcher Henry King and our studio manager Steph Chungu. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing is live at midday in London. And I'll return on The Globalist at the same time tomorrow. In between, we've got lots of sharp programming, and do dip into our archives. Lots of great shows there for you too. And don't forget, Quality of Life Conference coming up this weekend. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.